One of the biggest casualties of the Great Recession was that entrepreneurial spirit in America. Well, it began to come back a little bit in 2015 and 2016, but that zeal that is uniquely America is finally back and is back big time. According to the White House Council of Economic Advisors, business formation is simply on fire. Now, there are several measures of business startups, including business applications, which rocketed to 876,000 in the second quarter, by far an all-time record. Here now to discuss, Fox News contributor Liz Peek, Veronique Rugy, a Mercatus Center senior research fellow, and Erin Gibbs is with us, S&amp Investment Advisory Services portfolio manager. Liz, let me start with you. This number is absolutely, I mean, just by far the largest number we've ever seen. Now, this data series goes back, I think, to 2004. It's not an old data series, but certainly remarkable.
Well, it all has to do with optimism and confidence. And I think what we've seen in the last 2 years is small business optimism, the confidence of people running small businesses going through the roof. You cannot start up a new business unless you are optimistic about what lies ahead. And I think, as you know, many of us feel that the Obama White House just put up one barrier after another to people trying to start up businesses and, in fact, conduct business. So who was going to take that on? The answer is very few people did. We had a collapse in entrepreneurial activity, and thankfully it has come back. And these are big numbers.
These are big numbers. We went to an all-time record low. And I think, Veronique, the cautionary tale here is that in 2008, after the Wall Street implosion and the massive bailout of Wall Street firms, the pendulum swung so far over that the idea of punishing business always comes down to punishing the smallest business the most, no matter what. When you aim at the big boys and girls, you hurt the small ones the most.
Well, actually, and you had regulation like Dodd-Frank, which actually put a moat around the big businesses as they made a killing of this regulation. You know, there's what economists call regulatory capture. It's like they know how to use it and they know the regulation.
And they can afford the lawyers.
Yeah, they can afford the lawyers. And by the way, usually, if you remember that story with Goldman Sachs and the Fed regulator, where there's actually a lot of, it's very cozy relationship that doesn't happen when you're a small business. And right now, I mean, just to echo what Liz was saying, there's another factor is that capital is exploding. There's capital availability everywhere. And we can say whatever we want about President Trump, but certainly he sends a vibe that he is not going to be putting roadblocks in front of entrepreneurs and people.
It's hard to measure that, but it does make a difference, right? The vibe that comes from the White House,
Absolutely.
Right? You can't, it's hard to quantify it or whatever, but there is something, because we know that President Obama, he looked at profits as a four-letter word. I mean, he had a lot of animosity toward people making a certain amount of money. He said it on more than one occasion.
I would also, I mean, there just wasn't as much money that banks had to lend up until just the past couple of years.
Yeah, they were too busy selling their toxic assets to the Fed, right, and sitting on the rest of the cash.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we do see a cash surplus, and definitely the confidence that we're seeing in consumers also lends them to be able to lend to smaller businesses, take on those startups. So that's all part of it, is that there's just more cash sitting on the sidelines that's available for these riskier, smaller businesses.
To your point, last year, $148 billion in VC capital alone. And I think that money is we'll probably shatter that record. There was something interesting. American Express does a survey of entrepreneurship amongst women, Liz. And the numbers really blew me away. Of course, just like the chart we saw there, coming back. But from 2017 to 2016, a comparison of net new women-owned businesses added per day in the last year, 1,821. The last boom period we had from 2007 to 2012 was 1,100. Post-recession, 900. So we've doubled the post-recession rate in the last year alone. I don't think most Americans realize 1,821 businesses, new net businesses for women in this country every single day.
It's pretty impressive,
right? That is impressive.
Women are empowered all over the place. And by the way, a lot of surveys have shown that money management done by women, investment decisions made by women, et cetera, tend to work out pretty well because they are cautious, but they judge their risks pretty well. And when you're starting up a business, Charles, that is exactly what you have to do. You have to weigh the downside, which women tend to do better than men. I'm obviously generalizing here, but it is true. That is a characteristic that's come out in surveys. But they can be bold. And so it's a pretty good combination.
Can we, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would just say, though that number sounds impressive, and it is a big jump because about 10 years ago it was about 30% of all small businesses, and now it's at 40. So we're still, for female businesses, it's still less than half. But we're getting there.
Right.
Women are getting to being closer and closer to that 50% of all small businesses. And just in the past 10 years, and even in the past 2 years, we've seen a big jump. Whereas you don't see that in corporations. When you look at the number of CEOs in the S&P 500, or even in the Russell 2000, the small cap companies, it's still only 5%. So we don't see leadership in public companies, but we're seeing almost half of small businesses.
Despite all the corporate virtue signaling, right? And all of the things, and you know.
And it really hasn't grown.
Really
I would argue that there's more of a channel, though, that has to be sort of followed in the big businesses. It is a longer term, whereas you can start a business tomorrow.
I think it's also really great news for consumers, by the way, because women, even when they don't make the money, they are also in charge of actually spending it a lot of the time for a lot of things. So the more women in charge, it means the more people at the head of businesses who actually understand what
Well, you do deep dives into economic data, and you do deep dives into regulations. I mean, do you see this? Is this the beginning, the end? Where are we with this story? This part of the story, the renewed animal spirits.
I actually think that this is a trend that's going to continue. I mean, women have been doing well and better for a long time. I mean, and I think this is a trend that it's just the beginning. I actually think there will be lots of leeways and a lot of progresses in big corporations. It's going to take time. I mean, there need cultural shifts and all this, but I mean, it's unstoppable. I mean, women are educated. And
well, if you go back to colleges, right, and the graduation rate, certainly, if you go back to that part of the pipeline, it's inevitable, right? Because right now it's just, they're just outdoing men.
And business school, Charles.
In business school, right. So it's just inevitable that pipeline will break any barriers that remain. But overall, though, I mean, are you optimistic? You're investing money for people. Are you optimistic overall that this enthusiasm that we're seeing, that's reflected, forget about political polls, that's reflected in economic data, that this has a strong tailwind?
I do, and another thing I also just see is a higher participation of women in the labor force in general. That's always an important factor of a strong environment, particularly your GDP and your economics. The more people you have participating, when half of the population is participating, it's a good thing. So I see this as great, and the closer and closer we get to 50%, the stronger an economy we're going to see.
I would also just add one more thing. Social media has made so many things easier. You can start up a business in your basement or in your attic or whatever because of social media. A lot of the infrastructure that you used to have to accumulate and build, we really don't need anymore. So I think that has opened a floodgate to the kind of things we're talking
about. And there's no more stigma. You can go to a bank if you're a woman and you don't have a husband to co-sign your loan. It's not a problem. I mean, it used to be a real business starting stopper. This is not the case. The stigma of being a woman in business is just, doesn't exist like it used to.
And this money sloshing around here, you think that's going to still be available? Because there's got to be a lot of cash. I mean, we're just looking at these profits and the money that's being raised and these funds that are being raised.
Sidelines.
Billions and billions of dollars?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of investors that are hesitant even after this 10-year bull market. We still see a lot of cash just within companies, and there's still a lot of cash available to be lent.
But there's pressure, though, right? I mean, for professional money managers, whether it's in the market or anything else, those who've been sitting on this cash and have been cautious and they keep watching performance, at some point, you've got to get in the game. You've got to chase performance if you're going to keep your position.
As professional money managers, we've already been in. I think it's more, individual investors who just haven't quite been willing to jump back in the market. But we've always been 100% in the market.
But there has never been so much money in the hands of angel investors who are willing to take kids out of business school and give them $100,000 for a startup. It is unbelievable what's going on.
Well, overall, guys, I tell you, it is a phenomenal time. I love these kind of stories because those animal spirits are backing everyone.
And here also we know that the pay gap is not what the Democrats say it is. So that's another very, very strong indicator.
The political rhetoric is one thing, but in reality, everyone's got a shot right now in this country to do very well, or at least take their shot.
I agree.
Thank you, ladies. Appreciate it.